There are many deities and spirits that can be found all throughout the Greek pantheon that have some kind of association with war, but there is only one that is considered the god of war. And no, I'm not referring to Kratos before all of the hardcore God of War fans jump in the comments to tell me
this guy is wrong. Everyone knows that Kratos is the true god of war. He killed all of the gods.
No. Today's video will be on Ares, the actual god of war. For anyone who's already familiar with Ares, you will know that he was one of the 12 Olympic deities, the son of Zeus and Hera, so the unbridled rage, violent behaviour and constant need for bloodshed definitely isn't a huge surprise, considering that his parents aren't exactly known for their calm and forgiving nature. To the ancient Greeks, Ares embodied war. He represented its necessity and unpredictability, but much like war itself, Ares divided the Greek people. He only had a handful of cults and temples, with most being located in Sparta. The Spartans saw Ares as the perfect example of what a soldier should be: physically strong, resilient and well versed in combat, all things that we can associate back to the god of war. Needless to say, not all Greeks agreed, and it's quite fitting that his largest worship took place in Sparta, with their biggest opposition being the Athenians and Athena. The role Ares plays in Greek mythology is rather small, and I think most of this comes down to Athena being seen as superior. If you haven't already guessed, Athena and Ares were bitter rivals, who found themselves in constant competition. Most of this comes down to the attitudes and beliefs of the ancient Greek people. Ares represented what many Greeks strive not to be, whereas Athena was seen as much more well-rounded. She was calm, intelligent and highly skilled in warfare. Athena represented the best of both aspects, the scholar and the warrior, whereas Ares would have been seen as not much more than a soldier. So we can see that Athena was definitely favoured to Ares in the eyes of the Greek people, but she was also a favourite of Zeus. With most of his father's praise and attention being directed towards his sister, we can definitely see that this is something Ares is affected by. We do actually see this directly addressed in Book 5 of Homer's Iliad, where Ares accuses his father of showing favour towards Athena, claiming that it's because she was physically born from Zeus. And this might actually be true, but it might also be because Athena did more than just wage war. The few appearances that Ares does actually make, I'm sure many of you have guessed, feature around war and conflict, with the most famous being the Trojan War, which he was unfortunately on the wrong side of, with Athena once again emerging the victor. It was often said that Ares rode a chariot into battle filled with his children, so the apple definitely didn't fall far from the tree. These children included Phobos, meaning fear, Demos, meaning terror, and Enyo, who is often associated with discord, but who also appeared in numerous forms depending on the story, ranging from his mother or sister to even one of his numerous lovers. Together, Enyo and Ares had one son, named Enyalius, whom was said to replace his father as the god of war, and no, Kratos didn't kill him either. There are some accounts of Ares, or at least what we can consider the god of war, existing during the time of the Mycenaean Greek people, where at times he was actually referred to as Enyalius, so the name has existed for some time and generally has connotations of war. He also fathered the goddess Harmonia, who we can discuss a bit later on, and Adrestia, the goddess of equilibrium. The female warrior tribe known as the Amazons were also said to be direct descendants of Ares, with the most famous example being Hippolyta, who became queen when Ares gave her a magical girdle that signified strength and authority. The sacred shrines of the Amazons were also said to be guarded by the birds of Ares, which were said to have arrow-like feathers, and were quite similar to the man-eating Stymphalian birds slain by Heracles. The only story that really features the birds of Ares is that of Jason and his Argonauts when they came across the birds during their quest for the Golden Fleece. When the birds rained down their feathers, Jason and his men raised their shields to block the endless volleys, eventually using spears to poke the birds out of the sky and drive the flock away. In the stories where Eros is considered to be the son of Aphrodite, it's speculated that his father was Ares, which isn't really too unreasonable if we consider the fact that Aphrodite was a goddess associated with love, and Ares himself was someone driven by intense emotion and passion. To then have children who are solely associated with an emotion as powerful as love does make some sense, or at least it does to me anyway. There are a few stories that Ares does make an appearance in, so let's start with the one that I find most amusing, the affair with Aphrodite. So in order for Zeus to convince Hephaestus to set his mother free, he was offered a marriage with Aphrodite. But as great as that may have been for Hephaestus, the goddess was left miserable, and so when she noticed the attention of Ares, it wasn't long before the two started their affair, which I'm sure we can all guess was destined to end in disaster. One day when Hephaestus was away, Aphrodite and Ares were seen by the Titan Helios, who then told Hephaestus of what he had seen. Hephaestus then did what most people seem to do in that situation. He decided that he would catch them together, and so he created an invisible golden net that was designed to ensnare them. The next time Aphrodite and Ares enjoyed each other's company, the booby trap was triggered and the two were ensnared in a very compromising position. Hephaestus then decided that he would drag them outside and invite all of the gods and goddesses of Olympus to witness them in this position, and the two were then thoroughly mocked and shamed. but some gods did state that they would happily trade places with Ares as a testament to the beauty of Aphrodite. With Aphrodite and Ares now totally embarrassed, they had no choice but to return to their respective cities, but Hephaestus wasn't quite finished. Together Ares and Aphrodite had a daughter known as Harmonia, and when Hephaestus heard that she was marrying Cadmus, he decided to attend the wedding. As a wedding gift he would offer Harmonia a necklace that he had crafted himself. This trinket would then be known as the Necklace of Harmonia, and was said to bring bad luck and disaster, cursing anyone in its possession. Another story involving Ares details his interaction with the two sea giants, Ephialtes and Otus, who are often referred to as the Alodai. One day the two brothers came across the god of war and decided that they would kidnap him and place him in a giant bronze jar where he would remain for an entire lunar year. They would only let Ares go if the goddess Artemis agreed to marry one of them. Artemis did eventually make an appearance, and true to their word, Ares was set free, but then the two brothers began to argue as to who would marry her. Whilst this was happening, Artemis transformed herself into a deer and hopped in between the two. Eager to not let Artemis escape, the two brothers threw their spears, accidentally impaling each other, because giants are dumb. For the most part, Ares is described by Homer as being fairly neutral during the Trojan War, but he did eventually join the side of the Trojans after being convinced by Aphrodite, despite the initial promise he made to Hera and Athena to join the side of the Achaeans. When Diomedes initially saw Ares on the battlefield, he pulled his men back out of fear, but Athena would later order him and his men to launch a full-scale attack on Ares. Now face to face with Ares, Diomedes lunged his spear, and with the guidance of Athena he impaled the god of war, who let out a scream so loud and terrifying that it caused those on both sides to tremble in fear. Ares, now heavily wounded, had no choice but to flee, and so did the Trojan forces, knowing that without the god of war they could not win this battle. When Ares had heard the news that his son Asclepius had been slain by the Trojans, he was eager to swap sides and join the Achaeans. But at this point Zeus had forbidden any of the Olympians from joining the war, and when Ares attempted to enter the battle, he was stopped by Athena. When Zeus once again allowed the gods to join the war, the first thing Ares did was attack Athena, seeking revenge for the previous injury he had sustained. But Athena would once again best Ares by hurling an enormous boulder at him, yet another example of Athena emerging victorious over her brother. Something that I see quite often in the comment section are people asking me to cover the Roman counterparts to these Greek deities, and there definitely seems to be some confusion as to their similarities and differences. For the most part, the Roman counterparts are quite similar. They do feature in some different stories and have slightly different behaviour, but I think the real differences can be seen in how they were perceived by the people of ancient Greece and Rome, and in some cases it definitely gets quite interesting. We saw last video that Minerva is slightly different to Athena, but there is definitely an interesting contrast between Ares and his Roman counterpart Mars. We've established that Ares was seen as a necessary evil, but he was by no means a popular god, nor was he widely worshipped by the ancient Greeks because they instead favoured Athena. Mars, however, was portrayed in a completely different way to the Romans. He was seen as a protector in the same way that Athena was. Similar to how in the Greek pantheon Athena was only second to Zeus, Mars was only second to Jupiter. Where the Greeks saw Ares as destructive, the Romans saw Mars as a peacekeeper. The Romans highly valued their military, so naturally it makes sense that Mars was considered a highly respected deity. I think most of this boils down to the difference in ideas between the two. The Greeks were quite abstract thinkers who placed a heavy emphasis on philosophy, cosmology and metaphysics, so deities like Ares would have been seen as an unfortunate necessity. The Romans, however, believed in the physical and practical implementation of an idea. They highly valued manliness, toughness and physicality, and war was seen as a way to keep the peace, which is why Mars is such an integral figure to their set of beliefs and mythology. A point that I think is definitely quite interesting is that the Roman counterpart of Ares is actually more similar to Athena than Ares himself, and the role that Mars plays in the Roman pantheon is quite similar to that of Athena in the Greek pantheon. Hopefully this video has given you more of an insight into the Greek god of war, and if you have enjoyed this video then please consider leaving a thumbs up, or maybe even subscribing and hitting that pesky notification bell, otherwise you'll never know when I upload. Thanks YouTube. As always, I've been your host, Mythology and Fiction Explained, and here's something for all of you God of War fans out there to enjoy.
It was I who saved you in your time of greatest need.
I haven't forgotten, Ares. I remember how you saved me.
That night, I was trying to make you a great warrior.
You succeeded.
Kratos had done the impossible. A mortal defeating a god. Ares was no more.